Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what is going on in the international arena. Of course, earlier we've also discussed our foreign policy relationship and the balancing act between the Pakistan, US and Pakistan-China relationships. And this is, of course, something that we closely watch with reference to what is going on internationally as well. We know that there is an upcoming visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Washington. We also know that the US Secretary Antony Blinken is also expected to visit Beijing, which is important, especially in terms of how this visit is coming in after much talked about with regards to where the world is going or how perhaps the world order is moving into different blocks, something that was being asked and questioned to the State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Pakistan as well. And this is especially important when we take a look at what sort of impact is going to be created, and the statement coming in from the US that this is not the most significant event of the foreign policy for the US, which may point towards the significance of the visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Washington instead, and what the US expects from both these visits and its relationship to, of course, with regards to India and China. So we'll explore this in further detail and how will this visit actually transpire, especially in terms of easing tensions between the US and China, and then in terms of the development of relationship between India and the US, especially in terms of military and defense ties, what sort of engagement can be expected in the upcoming visit of the Indian Prime Minister. Our next segment is going to be focusing on what is going on in Pakistan. And for this, of course, we're going to be taking a look, especially in terms of the political dynamics that the country has been going through. There has been much talk about the date of elections in the past as well. And because of that, we saw a lot of controversy around the Supreme Court, political parties such as Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and of course, the ECP's involvement in all of this, and the president's role. And it's important that there has been a bill that the Senate has approved with majority, allowing ECP to unilaterally announce election dates without having to consult the president. And this is, of course, important in terms of what has happened in the recent past, but also in terms of how this will be able to strengthen the ECP in terms of its powers to unilaterally announce election dates, and then also move forward with different dates or a fresh election schedule as is part of the two amendments that have been made. So we're going to take a look at all of this and what this also means, especially in terms of Section 232 as well, with regards to disqualification of lawmakers and how that is going to also impact the way this moves forward. There was some opposition coming in from certain quarters with people talking about how perhaps this needs to be less complicated, or the role of the president and the governor as part of the constitution, and so the amendments need to be part of the constitution as well. So we explored that in further detail as well and what that means. And then how exactly is this going to impact the current scenario and dynamic, because the earlier issue with regards to the date of election is something that we have seen being part of the petition by the ECP, by the different political parties, and so a lot of discussion has been happening around that in the courts too. So how that will impact the way that the political parties plan to move ahead is going to be an important discussion. For this and more, as always, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi all the way from Quetta. Thank you, Farrukh, for being a part of the debate as always. We've also been joined by Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmad, Member Planning Commission, and he's joined us online. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishtiaq, for being a part of the show as always. And I'll start with you, Dr. Ishtiaq. These dynamics, of course, are important, especially when we take a look at where Pakistan stands. But before I come to how this will impact Pakistan and what Pakistan needs to keep an eye out for, I want to understand that when we talk about these two very important visits and these relationships to the US, it seems coming in from these statements by the US that they are deeming one more important than the other. And I understand, how, of course, with reference to the rifts that have been created. But what sort of possibilities do you think exist in this visit, expanding the way that China and the US can proceed further? And then how exactly will that also impact the way that the US relationship with India is evolving?
Well, Sana, if you ask me, China is a force for good. I think in the last 40 plus years, this is one major country that has really progressed for itself, and it is helping almost 154 countries across the developing world. It is sharing the wonderful success story that China has achieved with the rest of the world. On the other hand, United States has been focused upon, conflict prone geopolitics in different regions of the world, which has led to two wars, one next to our borders in Afghanistan for 20 years, and then there was another devastating war in Iraq. So if you compare these two great powers, emerging, power China and the superpower United States, their conduct has been altogether different in the past 30 years or so, at least in the post-Cold War period. So in last year, actually, the Biden administration, building upon Obama administration and Trump administration, created a hype about U.S. ties with China and initiating an official containment policy of China. I think that was very unfortunate and unnecessary. So what we have subsequently seen is that China has been treading the path of peace and progress. It has not, in fact, it has geared up by mediating a very important conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is hugely consequential for us. So, as far as India is concerned, India obviously post Cold War period aligned with the United States. So I would wish that U.S. Secretary of State's visit to China will break the ice. And I think because of the emerging rivalry between China and the United States, which is being imposed by the United States, not by China at all, and in which India, we have seen also post Ukraine, treating a little bit of a neutral path because it has to keep its relations with Russia. So is the case with Pakistan and the Middle Eastern countries. So I think all depends upon Blinken's visit to Beijing, and if it breaks the ice, and then despite having competition across Asia and the rest of the world, if China and America walk smoothly in the path to progress, then obviously Pakistan, India, and other countries in the Middle East and other aspiring powers have already shown a bit of neutrality in the most recent conflict, which risk pushing the world into a second world war. I wish that something concrete comes out of the American Secretary of State's pioneering visit to Beijing.
Right, absolutely. We've also been joined by Mr. Anwar Iqbal, who's a senior journalist. Mr. Anwar, considering the situation and where we are seeing the country's relationships move ahead, there seems to be perhaps an importance with reference to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US as well. When we especially take it in terms of what has been going on in the past, and especially with reference to the US's relationship and the recent visit to China, how would you expect the visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to impact the way forward that the US plans to engage both India and China? And what is the likely outcome and expectation, especially in terms of defense ties?
Well, there are a lot of expectations from Mr. Modi's visit. As we already know that the Americans see India as their key ally in that region, actually perhaps the main ally outside the Western Hemisphere across the globe. Actually, they expect a lot from India. They want India to help them in counter the U.S. influence, or in countering Chinese influence, in particularly in our region, South Asia and Central Asia. So they are hoping that the visit would lead to something, a substantial understanding, some sort of agreement, some sort of pact between the United States and India.
Right. Farrukh, the visits, of course, are important, and it's interesting to see that they're so close in terms of how we have seen the timings and, of course, the way that this is going to proceed further. But especially when we take a look at the way that there were talks going on with regards to increased tensions between the US and China, and how this dynamic is going to impact. And only yesterday, perhaps, we were talking about a different world order. How do you think that now, when we take a look at this situation, will this factor in terms of the overall relationship? I understand that the visits of Secretary of States, perhaps between countries, is something which is usual, but it is perhaps unusual in the circumstance when we take a look at the US's relationship. And so how will this then moving forward impact the way that people perceive the relationship of these two countries to impact the entire international world order?
Right, Sana, thank you very much. Just to actually clarify earlier, Dr. Ishtiaq is like my teacher. When he was talking about the possibility of world being pushed into another war, I think that he meant another Cold War because I heard perhaps it was the Second World War, which has already happened. So let me actually try to answer your question by actually focusing on what he said. What he said about China is absolutely correct. China has proven to be a very important and very responsible political power all over the world. We have seen recently that it has played a very critical role in bringing together two disparate forces that seem to be at loggerheads, that is Iran and Saudi Arabia or the Arab world. I think it is already a great accomplishment. Regarding what was said about the US and its relations, well, essentially, what we keep on critiquing is the political use of power by a superpower. There's only one superpower as we speak right now. It might change, and people keep on talking about emerging world order where dynamics will shift and there will be a multipolar or a bipolar world. But my humble submission is that we keep on reading everything in terms of politics. And, increasingly with every single day, the world order is focusing more and more on economics. And that is important because China has already risen when it comes to its economy's growth, and the US is already there. So people keep on talking about the possibility of a Thucydides trap that one power tries to replace another, the dominant superpower, and that can lead to some kind of conflict. I don't think that kind of a situation is either imminent or it is going to take place. All this talk of decoupling between China and the US is not only premature, but it is impossible. So, in coming days, what we are going to see is that China and the US will keep on hedging as they are doing with their electronics, with their mobile technologies and AI, but they will keep on working together as well. Right now, because America is about to enter into the election year, and Indian diaspora has very big role or influence in the elections as well. They want to actually keep Modi happy. They want to keep India happy as well. And simultaneously, if there is a possibility, they would like to build upon that relationship with China as well. We know that recently there was another, visit or meeting which was postponed. So this current visit is going to be very important. But you have seen how they are trying to manage expectations. This statement regarding Modi's visit and then Secretary Blinken's visit was actually given by Jake Sullivan, that is the NSA, US NSA, National Security Advisor. And where was it given? It was in Tokyo. So again, when it comes to China, there are many countries that keep on opposing relationship or strengthening of relationship between America and China, and India is one of them. Japan, of course, has its own history. So that is a dynamic they have to work on. Right now, I think that whatever is happening, they will keep on managing expectations, but I'm expecting some good results from Secretary Blinken's visit.
All right. Dr. Ishtiaq, it's important also to take this into light with reference to where Pakistan is positioned. And just recently in an interview, we heard the State Minister speak about how Pakistan enjoys very important and valuable relationships with both the US and China, and that if it is in a position which is strategically unfavorable for the country, it's going to be something that Pakistan, of course, will have to navigate through. But even given the situation right now and where we've seen the kind of difficulties that the entire world is facing, what do you think will be Pakistan's biggest challenges in managing this forward, both the US and the China and the relationship that it has with China? In light of whatever changes there might be between the US and China, Pakistan will still have to put forward this balancing act. How far can the country take this?
Well, Sana, I basically subscribe to what Farrukh just said. I'll be the last person to hold to Cold Warish kind of a attitude, which is based upon zero-sum game. I think gradually global politics and regional geopolitics also shifting towards geoeconomics, which is based upon win-win cooperation. Competition also does take place in that. Uh, as far as your question is concerned, today I was attending the 50th anniversary of the Institute of Strategic Studies Foundation. And Foreign Minister Bilawal precisely, laid down the framework which Farooq was just hinting. It is a framework of constructive engagement with all the neighboring countries as well as great powers, and which obviously include the United States, China, and Russia. Pakistan has been, upholding the traditional zigzag ties that we have had with the United States, because United States, after all, is a very big power, militarily speaking, technologically, in terms of popular culture, soft power. It has attributes which China doesn't have. But China has economically risen to the extent of challenging America's economic supremacy in a couple of years from now. So Pakistan desires constructive engagement, even for that matter, with Afghanistan under the Taliban. We are constructively engaging them despite the global or our own, serious concerns about that. So likewise, even if America has left Afghanistan, we try to keep relations with all the countries, because every country, every great power has its own attributes. So our foreign policy, if I understand currently, is really geared towards geo-economic centric, progressive, futuristic path that China is currently leading in the world. I wish that America also joins the race, because that is for the benefit of not only America, China, Russia, Europe, Middle East, but countries like Pakistan, which are economically, facing a huge crisis, and they want to recover and go smoothly on a path of economic prosperity and progress.
Right. Mr. Anwar, the situation, especially in terms of different countries impacting our relationship with the US, there is, of course, China, as we were discussing, but there is the way that we want to move forward with Afghanistan, and there is a lot of concern in terms of how perhaps the US would like to move forward and what sort of approach Pakistan is going to go ahead with. Another thing that the State Minister also spoke about. But I want to understand, especially in terms of the kind of humanitarian crisis we've seen and how Pakistan's role has been in the past and the kind of consequences that the country has inevitably faced because of what was going on in the neighborhood. There is a lot of different stakes and consequences involved for Pakistan. How will Pakistan be able to proceed with a policy moving forward, which is what they want to do as their own approach with Afghanistan, irrespective of what the US may agree or not, and especially in terms of any military involvement that can be there in terms of counterterrorism efforts? Mr. Anwar, we're unable to hear you. Can you try again?
Yeah, hello. I didn't hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
You were asking me. I thought you were asking somebody else. So basically, your question was how the development will impact U.S.-Pakistan relations. Is that what you asked?
Yes, and especially in terms of what is going on within Afghanistan as well. We were earlier discussing how the relationship between the US and China will impact Pakistan, and now we're talking about the way that the US wants to proceed with Afghanistan and the way Pakistan wants to approach this issue, and any possibility of military collaboration on this front.
There has been a positive development in Washington, as far as, or rather in Washington, the attitude towards Pakistan recently. After 2011, when Osama bin Laden was discovered in Afghanistan, the relationship actually deteriorated very rapidly. But since then, there has been a realization in Washington that Pakistan is an important country does have a role to play in that region, and also that it is important not just because of China and India, but it is important on its own right. It is a nuclear armed country. It is a large country with 200, almost 250 million people in borders of Afghanistan, Iran, Russia, China, etc. So now these are the things that used to be discussed before 2011 and then were almost ignored after that. And now they're coming back, and whenever you go to a seminar or talk show, or you read an article in the US media, you do see that these things are again being mentioned. And that perhaps is because of the realization that the type of relationship they're having with India it will not be a sort of a one-sided relationship as it was with Pakistan, when sort of Pakistan almost listened to everything that Washington wanted it to listen and did whatever Washington wanted it to do. In India, instead, Yemen is very careful and would like to calibrate this relationship in its own way, and therefore they see a place for Pakistan even in the relationship between India and the United States, and also obviously between the United States and China. So I think now Pakistan is once again seen as an important country, but the relationship cannot go back to. There is no appetite for the revival of the type of relationship that we had during the war in Afghanistan or during the war against terrorism, but we can still have cordial and mutually beneficial relationship with Washington.
Right, absolutely. And Mr. Anwar, there is, of course, the important dynamic in terms of US-India relationship as well. And we understand that whatever issues that Pakistan may have in terms of what the BJP government is doing and the kind of historical ties that we've had with India, and then the issue of course, the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, that perhaps is something which is not a priority in other bilateral engagements, and there are other things which are supreme in terms of the interests of countries. But especially with this visit and where we stand today, do you think that possibly there can be something that Pakistan should be concerned about in terms of the development and strengthening of the relationship between US and India, in particular with the military ties and the strengthening of this particular defense relationship?
I don't know. Of course, any major development in our region is no, I wouldn't say a cause of concern necessarily, but it is an important development for Pakistan, and U.S.-India relationship already has impacted Pakistan, and it will continue to impact Pakistan, and therefore Pakistan needs to review the situation very carefully. But I would say that there is no cause of panic. There's need to analyze the situation and make a policy that serves our interests. First, we have to realize how far Washington is willing to go in developing the relationship with Pakistan, how strongly it is involved in India, what does it expect from India, what role does it want India to play in vis-a-vis China, is India willing to play that role, and if not, where does Pakistan fit in? Obviously, Washington also realizes that Pakistan will not like to be a part of any policy that tries to sort of undermine China, because that is against Pakistan's interest. But at the same time, Washington expects Pakistan to maintain sort of, I wouldn't say equilibrium, but perhaps equilibrium between China and the United States. And I think Pakistanis also do not want sort of a zero-sum relationship with anyone. Pakistan does not want to choose between China and the United States, and wants to have good relations with both. And I think this is what the Americans have also been saying. And you recently you must have noticed that when we bought oil from Russia, there were concerns expressed in Islamabad and Washington that it may upset the United States, but it did not. They realized that Pakistan needs energy, and that cheap energy is available in the region, and they allow Pakistan to do so. So I think the same thing can happen in this relationship with India. That we want to have a very close relationship with India, but we also want to have cordial, friendly relations with Pakistan.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Anwar Iqbal, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Farrukh, with reference to what Mr. Anwar was speaking, especially in terms of us getting oil from Russia, I was also reminded about how perhaps this engagement has been done with reference to Chinese currency that the petroleum minister was talking about earlier as well, and the way there have been discussions around how perhaps regional countries or areas will be looking to shift to another currency, and eventually that perhaps is something that we might see in the future. And it may be far-fetched at the moment, but do you think that that's a possibility and an actual concern that the US may also share, especially when it looks at this region?
So unique about the current state of affairs. You know, if you are going to talk about the world order or lack thereof, it resembles a Royal Rumble, in wrestling. It seems that many things are happening simultaneously, and you cannot actually make your mind whether the world is going in one direction or the other. Intellectuals like Barry Buzan have actually talked about regional, blocks emerging, and they might be more integrated. But in this region, we have seen regarding SCO, first during the foreign minister's visit to India. At that time also there was a lot of hostility, and India-Pakistan hostility somehow threatened to hijack one more multilateral forum. And similarly, we have seen something else as well. For example, we have seen that SCO Apex meeting was to take place in India, and it has been actually converted into a virtual meeting. So right now I am not highly optimistic about the relationship between this region. We will keep on working, but every country has some detractor which will try to actually ensure that this does not happen. Having said that, our relationship with America, our relationship with China, both are very variable, and we are going to build on it. And I'm going to take what Anwar Iqbal Sahab said a step further. We want excellent relationship with China. We want excellent relationship with America. Why would we want bad relations with India? Right, it is my belief, and let me be a bit bold about it, that Pakistan shouldn't be worried about how India actually behaves or anybody else behaves, because the threat is not external right now. It mostly comes from within. One, the specter of terrorism was raising its ugly head once again. Secondly, the economic situation. If we can fix these two things, I think we are good, and we can build on relationship with others. What is the purpose of foreign policy, Sana? If you have a hostile relationship, you take hostility out of that relationship and make it neutral. If there's a neutral relationship, you try to convert it into friendship. And if there's friendship, you further strengthen it and ensure that it is not going to go sideways. So at this moment, Pakistan should be focused on this. I think this whole idea of India being a proxy, American proxy, trying to contain China, is something that now does not even merit any attention. Because when BRI was there, we kept on hearing that India is going to come up with a response. And surprise, surprise, their right idea was Adani. And then we heard from Hindenburg Research how rotten Adani Group is. So I'm not concerned at all about that thing at all. When it comes to the US-China relationship, I can assure you one thing. It is a very deep relationship. Remember, before India and Pakistan got free, Americans were not paying much attention to this part of the world. They were focusing a lot on China. And even before 1949, when the current China actually came into being, Chinese people used to call America the teacher. So with that kind of a relationship, I think they will be able to recover, and there isn't going to be any kind of confrontation. Similarly, we have seen with technology and trade partnership that both countries actually help each other whenever they trust trade. So I don't think that all this talk about a world order where there are going to be two poles which are going to be at loggerheads holds any water, any meaning at all. In coming days, you're going to see that after this election spell is over in the US, both no matter who wins, both these countries are going to strengthen their relationship. India's relationship important, but at this moment, America is more interested in selling its hardware to India. And that is not a concern for us because drone technology that is especially being considered is something that is now so advanced all over the world that it can be procured from anywhere, and Pakistan can do similar things. So we are not concerned about that at all right now. Let us wait and see how India and Modi's visit actually goes, and then we will discuss it again.
Right, absolutely. We're also going to be taking a look at what is going on within Pakistan, especially in terms of the political dynamics that we've been seeing and the recent approval of the Senate bill allowing ECB to unilaterally announce election dates. And it's important not just in terms of strengthening the institution, but also in terms of what has recently happened. Dr. Ishtiaq, the importance of this bill it lies not only in terms of talking about how the ECP must move forward with the kind of strengthening powers as to when to announce dates and how to move forward with the election schedule, but also in terms of the way that it impacts the role that the president also has to play given the current circumstances that we've just witnessed recently. What do you think are the most important impactful ways in which the ECP will actually be able to benefit from this particular bill, and the way that there may be certain challenges and question marks raised as to how the role of the president will change in this regard?
Well, Sana, actually, we have seen in the past 1 year or so, like all political systems function properly once there is a check and balance, between legislature, judiciary, and the executive. What we have seen because of the political, instability and the tensions, that we have seen between parties and leaders in the past 1+ year is that, the credibility of these institutions has been put at stake because of the rivalry, judiciary, executive, parliament, and the election commission also, faced a lot of issues in the process. So I
Mm.
think today's approval of the bill basically restores, the institutional harmony. I think it guarantees that election commission will do its task, which it is mandated to do under the constitution. That is basically to hold free and fair elections which no party afterwards can say that it was rigged. So I think it is important that all institutions of the state, whether it is judiciary, parliament, or executive, or any other institutions which come under the executive, they should function properly. And if any one of them exceeds its jurisdiction, then other institutions can balance it. That is a fine system that we have seen in Western democracies, particularly in the United States. And I think that is the path that we should emulate. I think all institutions should respect each other's mandate, and that is
Mm.
how country can beautifully march forward. We have had a lot of political tension, which is one reason of our economic crisis. And I think we need to overcome this poly crisis and go beyond to the elections and then having a elected government for the next 5 years.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmad, for joining us and being a part of the debate today. Farrukh, I also want to hear what you think in terms of especially the way that this bill is going to possibly impact the way that the elections will be announced later this year, or how the schedule is going to be managed by the ECP, given also what we have seen with regards to the role that the court or the ECP and the political parties have had to play in terms of deciding on a particular election date, especially after the dissolution of assemblies in 2 provinces. And also add to that, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, it's Section 232 that caters to the disqualification of lawyers, which has also been part of the amendments that have moved forward, whether or not that significantly impacts the situation as well.
Right, Sana. First of all, let me say that I totally agree with what Dr. Ishtiaq Saab was saying regarding this matter. Excuse me. I think that in recent years, what we have seen is that there was so much polarization in the political system that somehow our politics and our institutional chemistry became a Sas Bahuga drama or a telenovela for that matter. There was so much drama. All of a sudden, the president, issued a date of election without consulting with the Election Commission of Pakistan, or for that matter, the governors actually giving a date at all. With that kind of situation, then the matter went to the Supreme Court, and there too we kept on seeing a Supreme Court bench that kept on actually, eliminating all dissidents from its ranks, and they kept on actually shifting goalposts and changing the meaning of the law itself. So in that context, I think that it is good news that finally, because Election Commission also wrote a letter to the Parliament that my powers are being clipped, and after that, a committee, 8-member committee was formed by the Chairman Senate, and after that this bill has emerged and it has been passed by the Senate. Where I have some confusion or concern is how this moves forward, because remember, for any bill to be ascended or actually made law, it first has to go through the office of the same president who has been actually giving you mixed results. So what happens in the coming days is important. We are going to see how exactly this shapes up. But I've seen the the text of the bill itself, and I think that it very correctly tries to solve the matter the way 1973 Constitution would have. In 1973 Constitution, in original shape, this power was vested in the Election Commission. And then, as I keep on calling our Constitution a patchwork quilt, because repeatedly that Constitution was A, amended, B, it was held in abeyance, and every time it was restored, a dictator would add certain clauses, for example, 8th Amendment and then 17th Amendment, and then C, whenever Democrats then resumed power, they would try to, remove that context. Remember, there was a time when General Ziaul Haq's name was included in Constitution to give him amnesty or immunity. And then when they try to correct it, they also leave some lacunas. And because of that, everything is so complicated. And now what we have seen is in coming days, if this actually becomes law, it might actually fix all those problems by giving the powers, as was being pointed out by Dr. Ishtiaq, bringing this power back to the Election Commission as it should be. Now, regarding disqualification of the lawmakers and all that, I think that issue might actually end up once again in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and I don't want to prejudge that issue at all.
All right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, for those words, and of course giving your insight on the matter. There's much that still remains to be seen, and of course in a lot of ways Pakistan needs to be concerned both with what is going on at home and in the international arena as well, and we hope that we move forward with better decisions and better results as well. That's all that we have from the debate. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you tomorrow.